1 a.m. and a quorum of the board is present. The State Board of Education special meeting of August 19, 2025 is now called to order. We'll start by approval of the agenda in order of priority. If we can have a motion.
So move.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? Okay.
Bullock.
Yes.
Lipton.
Yes.
McMillan.
Yes.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Pugh.
Yes.
Robinson.
Yes.
Snyder.
Yes.
And Tilly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, at this time, Ms. Liz Evans the State Board Executive will introduce members of the State Board of Education.
Good morning. You have just been listening to Dr. Pamela Pugh, Board President for the State Board of Education. To her left around the table is Board Co-Vice President, Ms. Ellen Cogan-Lipton from Huntington Woods, NASB Delegate, Dr. Mitchell Robinson from Okemos, Ms. Nikki Snyder, and Board Secretary, Dr. Judith Pritchett from Washington Township. Now seated to my right is Mr. Tom McMillan from Oakland Township, Board Treasurer, Mr. Marshall Bullock from Detroit, and Board Co-Vice President, Ms. Tiffany Tilley from West Bloomfield. Lastly, seated behind Ms. Ellen Cogan-Lipton is Ms. Emma Young, the Governor's K-12 Policy Advisor ex officio.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Now for instructions for public participation. We welcome the participation of the public, and the public may register to provide comments during public participation portion of the meeting, which will occur at approximately 3:15 p.m. Those wishing to make public comment must register before 3:15 p.m. To provide public comment by telephone, please complete the registration form on the MDE webpage, www.michigan.gov/MDE. To provide public comment in person, please complete a green public comment form upon arrival. These instructions are also listed on the website. So again, welcome board members. As you all know, today is the second day of the State Board of Education interviews for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Today we will have 3 candidates for our next superintendent. Would like to acknowledge our consultants sitting in the back. For HYA, we have Dr. Max McGee, President of HYA. And Max, do you want to come and provide some instructions again? Just for the record.
Absolutely. Just very briefly. Thank you, Dr. Pugh and members of the State Board of Education. The candidates yesterday were all expressed their appreciation for your engagement and attentiveness throughout the process. As Dr. Pugh noted, you will be interviewing 3 additional candidates today using the same 16 questions that were asked yesterday. And during this first round, it is important to ask each candidate the same set of questions. The second round with the finalists will be different. If a member today would like a candidate to elaborate upon or clarify an answer, it is acceptable for a board member to ask a follow-up question related to the specific question or answer at hand. Once all questions have been asked, and if time allows, a candidate may have a question for you or a closing remark they would like to make. I think we had one candidate yesterday. There was only one with some extra time at the end. Following the 3 interviews, the board will deliberate and decide upon the number of finalists to bring back next week for a final interview. Having spoken with all candidates, both the 4 yesterday and the 3 scheduled for today, I can share that all 7 are extraordinarily appreciative of this opportunity to meet with you and express their eagerness to get to know you and to answer all of your questions. Thank you.
Thanks. And Dr. McGee, before you leave, if there's no questions from board members.
Well, exactly how, Madam President, exactly how will this transpire at the end in the selection of the people coming back at the end of the day?
Yes.
You'll just accumulate, we'll just let you know individually?
So we have, we'll actually have an open, transparent process, Mr. McMillan. We're, and I can review that now, or we can wait till later, that we'll ask, what do you prefer, Dr. Pugh?
We can do it later. I mean, if
Yeah.
time, if there,
I want to make sure I know
Yes.
what we're,
absolutely.
writing and.
So, yeah, so we're going to ask, we're not going to collect your documents, we're going to ask each of you to identify the top three just in your side that you would like to bring back individually. So we're not going to collect any rubrics or any information, but we will ask each of you to, say, who's my first, second, third, or, hey, I only like two of these, I'd only really like to bring back two.
Okay.
And whether it's rank order or whether just, hey, I want to see these three, we'll go into a little more detail after that. But that's what we'll do. We'll ask each of you individually to choose your top three.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
No one is thinking that there's anything they need to be doing now other than keeping notes. Okay,
All good?
yes, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. McKee. So the next item of business for today is the interview of Dr. Glenn Maleko. Dr. Maleko, we welcome you to the table.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. If I can come around and say hello.
Good
How are you
morning.
doing?
Good, how are you?
Dr. Pugh?
Good to see you.
You too.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Robinson. Nice to meet you. And good morning to everyone on the, as well. I know it was a little wet getting in today, but we
Oh, my
needed the rain, right?
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. I will ask the first question before, I'll let you get situated.
Okay,
And
sure.
if there's any question that you have of us before we get started.
Okay. I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank you for the opportunity to interview today. Appreciate the work that you do as a state board, supporting the students, and good luck with your decision moving forward. I know it's very important, and we're here to support you and the next state superintendent and students throughout the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Dr. Maleko. So I will start by asking you to tell us about a time when you had to make a difficult ethical decision in your leadership role. What was the situation? What did you do? And what was the outcome?
So, first of all, with ethics, I would just say that, ethics are at the core of who I am. We have core values in the Dearborn Public Schools, and I believe heavily in that. I think if you talk to any of my references or people I work with, they know that's the core of who we are. Honesty, integrity, working together. So I bring that with me each and every day. One situation that comes to mind, and I've used this situation before, it was actually my second year as superintendent for the Dearborn Public Schools, and we had the read by third grade legislation that just came into play. And I had a parent group that was, advocated. They didn't like what was in some of the law, the retention. Now, we knew the retention provision was not effective. We know the research on that. I may have disagreed with it. We had, individuals come into our board meeting asking us to just blatantly disregard it. I had multiple communications coming into the board at that time. I had one contacting another district saying, we're not going to follow the rules of the law. Well, here's the thing. We're obligated to follow the law. We're obligated to follow the rules. However, we may disagree with it. And what do we need to do? To advocate for change. That's something that I've done throughout my career. At my time as MASA president 2 years ago, working in advocacy, whether that be in Lansing or laws that impact us on a federal level. Just last month, I was in Washington advocating for the release of the title dollars, the Title II, III, and IV. Appreciate the board's stance on that because I know together, I'm part of the AASA governing board for the Michigan superintendents. After rotating off of 6 years as MASA executive board. And anytime I'm in Lansing or in Washington, our core values and our integrity goes with us. And I'm pleased to say too, look what happened. We did advocate. MASA got exemptions in the law in 16, 17. And then eventually, and it was the year I was president, with the retention provision was repealed. So that's what I told the community. Look, we're obligated to follow the law. We might disagree. We can go to Lansing. We can work together. We can, advocate for change. And I think I've had a track record of doing that throughout my career.
Thank you.
Next question.
Before, if all board members can turn on their mics and just keep them on.
Next question. What is your vision for public education in Michigan over the next 5 years? And how would you ensure measurable improvement in student outcomes statewide?
So my vision is, you have the top 10 plan. I've looked at the plan. The plan is intertwined into, we've incorporated in our school district the areas that are in that plan. I've looked at other high achieving states, and you have solid strategies within there, within the goals. And my vision over the next 5 years would be, to take that plan to make a difference for all the students across the state of Michigan by implementing that plan. Things like the early childhood to literacy, we know the teacher pipeline. These are all things that we know other states have been successful. The successful states are effective at implementing. And ultimately, we need to ensure, funding adequacy, funding equity for students to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all students throughout the state of Michigan, regardless of their zip code, background, or personal experience. For me, that means academics, social emotional learning, and it's going to be working as a team. One of the things I think you'll find with me, you got to have people live and breathe that vision and understand what it's about. And you need to do that through collaboration and working with school stakeholders. I'm extremely collaboratively in my nature. I've worked with many different groups to build alliances, to work with the community, and to bring that together so that we're all on the same page. We may have disagreements at times in the education profession, but overall, we're here for all students, for public education, and to make a difference. So my vision is to bring people together. I think that if you'll see in my application and my materials, I have a lot of references from people all over the state, whether that be superintendents, to community members, to the business community, the PTA. And the reason is because I'm all collaborative. That's my leadership style. I want to work in collaboration to make a difference. So what I would say is this: you have a plan that you set the vision as the board, and then I go and implement the protocols. Whether we need to look at some things or bring stakeholders back together to make that happen, I think that may be something, if the board, under the directing the superintendent, would like to do. I think it does make sense. I know in Dearborn, we look at that plan every 3 years. We have data every meeting, and I've seen your meetings. You are looking at metrics that you're measuring. I've seen the presentations as I've watched the board meetings, and I've looked at the annual report. So my vision is to work with you, the board, collaboratively, in partnership, to build alliances with all the stakeholders across the state. The associations, the business community, student voice. I know there's a student advisory council here for the state level. I have an advisory council. We can't forget about student voice. That is my favorite thing to do, is to working with students. They're constantly providing me with messages and staying in contact. So my vision, is the vision that you have, that you set forward. It's working together, and I'm able to bring people together and work together collaboratively, and that's what I would do over the next 5 years. We know that we're not pleased. We know there's strengths in Michigan, but there's also areas where we can improve, and I think together we can do that, and I'm steadfast in my belief that working together will make that happen.
This next question is about deep educational and systems experience. How has your experience as an educator informed your approach to system-level leadership? Share an example where your teaching or educational leadership experience influenced a district or state policy.
So I would just say that I think it's essential. I worked in the trenches. I was a substitute teacher. That's where I started. In fact, initially I was looking at a career in law, and then I decided after coaching hockey I wanted to go into education. University of Detroit Mercy, they were recruiting substitute teachers for the Dearborn Public School. I signed up. Almost 30 years later, I'm still working for the organization, and I've worked in multiple roles. Elementary teacher, assistant principal, principal. Those have been invaluable. They were invaluable for me when I became the superintendent in 2015. I remember I had so many people approaching me when you're the new superintendent. They want things, they need things, and if I would have granted everything, I probably would have broke the bank in the budget. Maybe wouldn't be here today right now, but I understood what was there. I think I bring a sense of credibility because I have worked with students in the classroom. I have been a principal, working together. So I think that those experiences are invaluable. They were invaluable to me as a superintendent. Now, I've worked in the same district, and I would say that, working in Dearborn in those areas gave me an advantage because I had an understanding of all the dynamics of Dearborn Public Schools, third largest district in the state, a very complex organization. We have 2,500 employees. We have 20, with our adult education, we're over 22,000 students. I would say this to you. My early years also helped to form my beliefs. I was a teacher at Salina Elementary. It was the highest socioeconomic disadvantaged population in the district. 97% free and reduced lunch. It was always an immigrant population into this area. This area of the city was isolated because of the Ford Rouge plant. It bordered the west side of Detroit. And I'll never forget, and I've told this story before. I was a third grade teacher my first year. I was a rookie teacher. And you're very excited, and I opened a journal book from one of my students. And what I saw in there, and there was a picture that the student drew of someone getting shot. And I was obviously concerned. I went to the principal right away. I'm a rookie teacher. How should we handle this? I'm very concerned. What is this? Does this mean violence or something? And she's like, okay, go to the social worker. We went to the social worker. Social worker called the parents, called the student in. The student's parents couldn't speak English, by the way, because we had a large ELL population, so they needed translation. It turned out that student saw his uncle get shot outside a concentration camp in Iraq after the first Gulf War in the 90s. So this was 1997. That experience, what it meant to me, it was eye-opening. Because here's the thing, I grew up in a middle class. I didn't have to deal with what that student had to deal with. I don't understand what that student necessarily, I could be empathetic, but the one thing as an educator is that I could work my hardest to make sure that student will receive the highest possible, best education they could, so that they would be successful in society. That has stood with me throughout my career as a teacher, a principal, as a HR director, and a superintendent. And if I'm fortunate enough to get this position, that story will stay with me, and I will remember that student. Because how many other students are dealing with challenges, whether that be violent situations or tough situations or worried about food on the table? These are important things that we have to deal with. And the way that we can empower our students is by working hard for education. So back to that question on vision, that's my vision as well, making a difference for each and every child.
I have a follow-up question on the last question, just to back
Sure.
up to your references. You mentioned that you have business references that you'd like to bring everyone together.
Yeah.
I see 6 pages front and back of, established education professional references. Can you share with the board who, in the business community you're connected with that you want to bring together to the table?
Well, I think, first of all, I am part of the Dearborn Chamber of Commerce, and I was Business Person of the Year in 2019. So working together, we've brought businesses into our schools to help support our academies model. We actually went to Tennessee, and we studied their model and what they were doing with bringing the business communities in. So there's a couple of things. You can bring business partners in for education and helping within the class and in the schools, and we've done that. We started that academies model where students can take to a career. The other thing is you want to partner with business just on your strategic plan and other areas. One of the business leaders that I'm proud to be associated with is Mr. Gary Torgo. He's in there. He's the chairman of Huntington Bank. And the one thing I'm going to tell you about that is that he brought in scholarships They call it the Flip Scholarships, and we were working with Mr. Osama Sablani from the Arab American News, and we've worked in partnership the last 3 years, and we've brought in scholarships together to support students. And it's not the high-achieving students. These were the students that really needed the funding to go to college. So these are the kind of things that we can work with in the business community. I think it's very important that we have the business community sitting at the table when we're strategic planning, renewing. They come to the table when we renew our strategic plan in Dearborn.
Very good. Thank you.
Describe a specific initiative that you've led that addressed educational inequities or closed opportunity gaps, and what data or feedback informed your approach, and what were the results?
So I think there's a lot of initiatives that I can speak to throughout my career, but since you're asking for one, I will say this. As superintendent, first of all, our graduation rates have been between 93 to 95%. They peaked at 95%. In fact, I've presented on this area. I'm a frequent presenter. You'll see it in my packet, in my portfolio at state and national conferences. One of the areas that we looked at was our graduation intervention model and how we've increased graduation rates. In fact, Ms. Bailey from MDE just recently contacted me. She wants me to do a spotlight and potentially present at a conference, I believe, in January. We've published on it as well. But I'm mentioning that connected to college admission and post-secondary. And the reason I'm going to say that is I believe it's very important. It's not just what you're doing with graduation rates. That's very important. But how successful are your students after that? What are they doing? What we've done in Dearborn and what I've led is a great partnership with Henry Ford College. We have a 72% college admission rate. I've looked at top achieving states like Massachusetts. They have a 72% college admission rate. Michigan is at about 52 or 53% on a state level. How have we done that? We believe in options for students at multiple levels. I have 3,800 students that are taking college classes on the college campus every year. We have estimated how much we are saving parents when you look at what you would have to pay for a 4-year degree, approximately $20 million in tuition. We're providing opportunity through just the funding and the ability that you may need to go to college. So students are going into our early college program. They can go into our collegiate academy program, or they can just take dual enrollment classes. Some may want to just go into the AP advanced placement classes. Some go to Harvard and other places. But for others, Henry Ford College, it's a great partnership. I think you will not see a partnership between a superintendent and a college president anywhere other than Dearborn with what we're doing, and we're making a difference. I'm very proud of that. We purchased buildings on the college campus for our early college. The other thing is in your goals, you talk about teacher pipeline. I recognized that many years ago when I saw the shortage and the data was out there. I remember Brian Whiston. Brian Whiston was my mentor. I wouldn't be here probably today in that position. I remember him talking about the teacher shortage. I know Dr. Rice has and others. I started a pre-education early college on the Henry Ford campus to help in that area, along with working. So I think, Dearborn Schools has 75% free and reduced lunch. We have 50% ELL. Our demographics were about 10% of special ed. On that college rate, we're in the top 5% of the state, and we're one of 3 when you look at demographics that achieve at that level of making a difference for students. So what are we doing? We're closing that gap by allowing these students to go into careers, post-secondary education and beyond. I believe this is very important. These are areas that I would believe as state superintendent, if I'm fortunate enough, it's in your plan, but I have ideas on how we can expand that, and I would like to do that.
Thanks.
All right, we got multiple touch points on this question.
Sure.
Could you please share with us a time when you had to respond to a community or a group that felt unheard or marginalized? And so we'd like to know how you approached that scenario or situation, and just as your previous example, you had a takeaway. What did you learn from this scenario or situation that you're going to?
Okay. So the first thing I'll say is in Dearborn, there's a lot of diversity, so we have a lot of marginalized groups we work with. It's kind of been throughout my career. One that I can speak to, and there's many examples, but I'll speak to this one. And really, it actually started, I became principal of Salina Intermediate in 2003. I was assistant principal, then I was the principal. And I had an aspect of the community that would come to me, and they wanted to see, you know, more hiring from the community members, the people that look like them, the role models from the community. Now we understand that we need to, you know, one of the problems we had is we didn't necessarily have, with that diversity they were looking for in the hiring is, well, we didn't necessarily have qualified people, right? Or people that were going to become a teacher, for example. One of the things that I did, and I was one of the first ones as a principal, I worked at the time with our director in the Title I area and other areas. We started what is happening right now, honestly, with the grow your own money, because what we were doing is we found grant funding for parapros and other educators. In fact, my first secretary that worked with me, she took advantage of that and went on to become a teacher. And so I think it was working together, because I always believe that we need educators that are role models that can relate to the students. Now, qualifications are always number one. You have to meet those standards, hands down. But I also believe I've had a track record, also as superintendent, of hiring practices that reflect the communities that we serve and the diversity. Again, qualifications, high standards are very important, and people need to be qualified. And so I partner with those community members too, because the one thing I said is, you know, it can't just be on us, and as superintendent, it would come up again. It came up for one of my high schools. They wanted to see more support through not just teaching, but other areas that could support students. And I did say to them, well, why don't we partner together? We have positions. Let's help with the recruitment. Let's get out there in the community and work together as a group and collaborate. And that's what the one that has stuck with me, because I've been doing it throughout my career. Again, in Dearborn, you know, we have a lot of different groups and diversity, and I'm proud of the fact that we have hired high-quality people from the community.
A follow-up? Regarding marginalized and unheard groups, we have foster care students in Michigan, and you know they oftentimes they can't graduate, or many of them, because they go from family to family, school to school, and their transcripts don't follow them, and so they can't graduate. And also, when they're going school to school, the authority of the biological parent doesn't follow them necessarily as well. And so it just seems like this is something that is extremely important, and I'm just asking, if you become the state superintendent, could you commit, assuming the board you know, authorizes you or directs you to solving this problem within a reasonable amount of time to kind of help this marginalized group?
I mean, yeah, I take direction from you, the board, if I'm fortunate enough. So obviously, I would definitely, the goals and the initiatives of you, the board. I would also say, yeah, I appreciate you mentioning the FOS, because you know, we're here about students. And I gave you that story of the student in third grade, but how many kids have had those kind of situations? Foster care is another perfect example, Mr. McMillan, so I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another area. We need to do in the education whatever we can to support those students. Get them enrolled right away, making sure it's easy. I've dealt with that before sometimes with other districts where it's hard to get the records and other things, not just with foster care, but in enrollment. So yes, absolutely, I'd be the direction of the board. We need to support our foster care students, you know, it'd be very important.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I wanted to follow up on that. What have you done in your district to help with the process to make it easier for foster youth? Have you made any improvements?
So we do in two areas. We have a liaison that helps with the homeless and foster care, we have a lot of refugee as well. And so what we do is we have a district contact that oversees it. And then what they do is they develop contacts at the specific building to provide support for those students that are identified.
Thank you.
Describe a situation where your communication style helped resolve a conflict or build trust across a diverse group of stakeholders.
Okay. First of all, I'd say my communication style, I'm very transparent, and you can find me all over social media. I've built that up. I think it's important that we're providing a message out there, and a positive message, and promoting the district, promoting our students, promoting the state. I think those things in communication are important, but I also think it has to match not just with social media, but it has to match with being out there and building relationships. There's one that I can speak to specifically, and I've used it because I use this example because I provide training to aspiring superintendents and new superintendents through the Michigan Leadership Institute. I've been doing that for a decade now. And I have a situation I go through. And it was a controversy that we had in one of my high schools, and there was an investigation that occurred. In fact, there was a lot of misinformation going on throughout social media. In fact, even out of state. This was back maybe my second year as superintendent. And one of the things that I was able to help with is to provide the actual facts in the situation. We did have to have an investigation, and the authorities were involved. It was handled, but what I had to talk to and bring with the community was that, this is the actual situation, and we are handling it, and there was a trust. So my communication style is twofold in dealing with situations, because I had a trust in the community. I had been there. When I came and talked to the different groups that were concerned about this, they said, okay, they're handling it. We know. We have trust in the superintendent and his team because we know who he is. We're not going to believe just the things that are being thrown out at us to see what sticks on social media. And the way I counter it is also in communication, because I can counter misinformation because I have such a big following of students and parents on my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and then we do a twofold system. So as superintendent, and I would do this as state superintendent, I would have my own social media to promote, but I also work collaboratively with my district communications to help clarify that information. And that situation in particular, we were in the media and the press for about a week and a half to 2 weeks, and the only thing I say is there were no other negative stories in Metro Detroit, so they were covering us for a long time. So I've learned how to deal with the media as well. And, I've provided training to superintendents on how to deal with these situations because they can be intense. But I am out there. Everybody knows who I am. I have let me see. If I have it here with me. I had my vision sign I was going to pull out. Was in there. But anyway, you'll see a student's first sign that I bring with me, and it goes everywhere, and it's promoting about students. It's being engaging in the community and working with community members and building trust. And so my communication is very transparent.
Thank you.
Oh, this is what I wanted to show you. It's in the folder. So this goes with me, the students see it, it goes everywhere, and this is the trust that we build in the Dearborn Public Schools. And you'll see it with me. The students want to get in the pictures with me, the community does. The partnerships I built with the mayor, the city operations, and everyone knows we have this because this is what we stand for. And so I had support through that situation because I was very visible and present throughout the community.
The next question is on the political nature of the position of state superintendent. Michigan's political landscape is complex. Tell us about a time when you advanced an educational policy or initiative in a politically sensitive context. How did you build support while staying focused on students? Who was the opposition, and how did you work with them?
Yeah, I understand the politically charged, and I know you deal with it all the time, with different things going on, and the support that you've provided to us as a board with some of the situations or the letters that have come from Dr. Rice and things of that nature. I would say, so 2024, the example I'm going to use is this. We had to renew our operational millage in Dearborn Public Schools, and that's required under the state funding law every 10 years. It was approximately, I believe, just under $40 million for our entire district. So it was very politically charged because you had different aspects of the community, they support education. Dearborn has always had that. But there's also those that were not favorable, whether it be for taxes or whatever. Now, this was a renewal, so it was not an increase. And I had different groups throughout the community. I had some, blasting things on social media and opposing. One of the things we did, again, it goes back to that, meeting with groups. I met with the groups that were organized and opposing it. Some of them ended up not opposing it. Others still opposed it. In the end, we built an alliance with the unions, with the community members, support of business, Chamber of Commerce, throughout the community. And myself, so it wasn't just me. You got to have a team, right? This is about a team getting out there. As one person, you're not going to be able to do that to pass a millage or a bond. And so my team was everywhere. We actually, the mayor assisted. He helped me. Mayor Hammoud has done some great things in Dearborn, and we partnered on that. He got me with some of the groups. Had huge support over that. I had support from, obviously our 7 board members that were very supportive of this working together, the city council, everywhere. So we would meet. And in the end, and it was exhausting, I will tell you, because I was in meetings where I had to also, there were misinformation that was being thrown out there to try to defeat the operational millage. And in the end, and this was during the primary for the presidential election. So there was a lot of things going on in Dearborn at the time. And in the end, we passed it with a 72% approval rating. That was very energy-intensive, and it was tiresome. But I have the energy to do these things because of the students. That's what gives me, my passion is making a difference and fighting for the needs of our students.
Hello. Do you think that MDE should be involved in helping schools instruct their teachers and administrators how to change their systems so that parents wouldn't understand that their boy, little Billy, is being called Susie at school, using the girls' locker room and bathroom? Is this something, and being called Susie instead of Billy, which is being used at home? Is that something that MDE should be doing, is helping the schools know how to do that?
I mean, so that's kind of a specific question. I would just say that MDE should support the needs of all students, no matter what that may be. I think each individual circumstance is different, and we need to have the individuals within the, to provide support socially and emotionally and otherwise for the students. We have a supportive network in our district to provide such support when students are going through different challenges. I think it's MDE's role in school districts to treat each situation individualized, to work with students and their families to provide support regardless of what the situation may be, or the name that individuals want to be called within the schools. That's where I would say with MDE, and then I would have to look at specific things based on those circumstances.
When you say work with their families, does that mean that the family should know? It shouldn't be hidden from them?
I mean, in general, we partner with families and communities, so I think we need to be honest and upfront with families, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, okay. I have the next question. I'm sorry. Thank you. Please give an example of how you built and sustained a successful partnership with a stakeholder group. Example, unions, families, tribal nations, legislators. What evidence can you share that made it successful?
Well, this is my wheelhouse. How much time do you got here today? This one I'm excited to answer. I think you see it in my application, but it's not just within that. It's the support, because I work together, I build alliances. Did you say one example, or can you use more? Sorry.
Just an example, one, yeah.
Okay. So well, union, I'll just bring up the union groups. I have a strong relationship with the unions. Our district has been AFT, so I've worked with Terrence Martin, Dave Hecker. I have multiple union presidents that I've worked with over the years, including the time when I was the HR director. There were tough times we were negotiating contracts. When I became superintendent in 15, I do remember Brian Wisting coming to me and saying, yeah, you become superintendent, we're not cutting budgets anymore, in 15, because we weren't. But we were, and I was doing it on his cabinet. Every year, those are tough negotiations. I mean, we were looking at reductions in staffing, reductions in salaries after the downturn in the economy. And so we were able to work together, and I've now worked with multiple union presidents. In fact, I had one of the union presidents, we can disagree at times, but she was at the board meeting, the last board meeting of the year, and complimenting how we've been responsive to their concerns. I meet with the unions regularly. It's set up. They have access to me. I think that collaboration is important. And again, there may be times where we disagree, but it's very respectful. We also understand we're all in it for the students, and I understand that unions have they're supporting their members, and their members are supporting our students. So we have to work together. And so that would be the one example, but I have so many. Like, I can talk about my student advisory council, and then I'm just going to say, I know you said one, but my working with the legislator. Okay, I think that's important. If I can jump on that too, is when I became superintendent, I created what we call a network legislator group. What is that? That is the legislators from the state that have a piece of Dearborn, and it's the federal legislators. At the time, it was Congresswoman Dingell. Now it's Rashida Tlaib, who's our district because of the redistricting. And so they would come regularly to the meetings. I would have the state legislators in there as well. And I've had multiple over the years that I've been superintendent. Why did I do that? I bring students into these meetings too. And here's the thing, like, I know there'll be time legislation's up and we have to call a legislator and advocate in a certain area, but I can't just do that. I have to have relationships with them. Sometimes they may need stuff from us. They love talking to our students and getting the insight as to what's going on. And so I would think that was the other area, but there's so many. I think, as I was applying for this, I don't think Dearborn wants to see me go, but at the same token, they're very, very excited. And they support me, and it's because I have worked and built alliances with so many groups. I had an outpouring of support.
Thank you.
And I'm next. Describe a situation where you face significant resistance or criticism from an important stakeholder group. How did you handle it, and what principles guided your actions? And I can repeat.
Oh, yeah,
parts
please,
of
yeah,
it.
sorry, if you don't
Okay,
mind.
that's okay. Describe a situation where you face significant resistance or criticism from an important stakeholder group. How did you handle it, and what principles guided your actions?
So again, this is going to go down to, the example I'm going to use is boundary line changes that we had to employ in Dearborn. We had overcrowding, especially in the high schools. We're a closed district, but we were growing. We've been growing over years, and we had a problem in the high school level. I've gone to the MLI, and during the superintendent training, one of the things that we're cautioned as superintendents is be very careful when you want to change boundaries. It's highly charged, the local schools. So I did, but I have an obligation to the long-term stability of the district to make sure we can't have, for example, at the time, Fortson High School at 2,900 kids. It was too large. And so I did it right away. It was the right thing to do. It was tough. We had to get out there and talk about the reasoning why we were doing this, because we were trying to benefit all students. We looked at different options. What we did, and I've done this throughout my career, and I do this regularly. I have these chatting events that I go and meet in the schools and meet with the community. So that's what we did, is we had all these meetings set up that we went throughout the community, and some of them were very intense. And part of it was because sometimes you'd have like the alumni at, for example, Edsel Ford High School. I'll just use one of our three main high schools. And they liked the traditional boundaries of where the students came from. There's tradition, the same with the others. But here's the thing, we had extra space in that high school because of enrollment. We were overcrowding at Fortson and Dearborn High. And then we had to look at middle school and how they would feed into the different areas. There were times that, people were very emotionally charged about that. What happened, though, is we went to the community. We didn't go to the community saying, this is what we're gonna do. We were legitimately saying, what is your feedback and your input? So we had some plans that we had to design. Of course, as leaders, as a superintendent, I have to have a plan. But I didn't have one plan, I had a few ideas. In fact, the 2 to 3 plans that we were talking about, we even realized that that wasn't gonna accommodate the community. My team went back, we took the feedback, we listened, we tweaked the boundaries based on what we heard there, and we generally had more support. I'm not saying everyone was pleased in the end. As leaders, you're gonna make tough decisions. But we had to do that for the long-term stability of the district. And again, I'm gonna go back to my collaboration and getting out there and meeting and working with people. And it's not just me, it's my team. We're out there, I have my team in the schools having these chatting town hall events that go on. So that's what we did through that. And I do remember it. It was very intensive at times because people, you know, they were supporting their local schools and they didn't want to see changes.
Thank you.
This question pertains to literacy. As you know, the state of Michigan legislature has enacted a multifaceted literacy law, which is meant to directly assist children, particularly those in pre-K through 3rd grade, with improving their literacy skills. Please share with us your impression and knowledge of these bills. And as state superintendent, how would you lead the department, the ISDs, RESAs, and local districts in implementing and monitoring the effects of these laws? Additionally, could you tell us what part, if any, you played in informing or providing support for these laws prior to their enactment? And please be specific.
Yeah, there's a lot to that one, right? So I think the laws are important. I already talked about the read by 3rd grade law that was implemented across the state. And again, that law, talked about, support for kids. We all believed in that and the importance of literacy and coaching and interventions. I think the recent law of the dyslexia law that requires we have to screen all students now, preschool to 3rd grade. I think that law also provides support for implicit direct instruction in the classroom. And what I think is very important, I don't think the read by 3rd grade law spoke to this, but the new law does with the multi-tiered systems of support process. We believe it heavily in Dearborn. We have it in our plan. Actually, my team has worked with, I believe there's an MTSS team here at the state level through MDE. And my team who's worked, and a lot of times our team takes the leadership in a lot of areas, but they've collaborated with the team and they're very pleased with the work that's being done here at the state level. So I want to compliment MDE for those, for those areas. How would I lead? Okay, you said about ISD. So we were just at a county meeting last week, Thursday, Wayne County with Dr. Colbert, Wayne County RESA. And I think that the ISDs have a place in leadership. Now, a district like Dearborn, we're large, so we can branch out and do things because of our size. There are some districts that are a lot smaller and they really need the support of the ISDs. It's critical. I still get that support even with a larger district. We talked about the literacy promise that we're looking at for Wayne County, and I give Dr. Colbert a lot of credit for looking at that. Every time we meet as superintendents in Wayne County, we're looking at literacy data, we're looking at the laws, we're looking at how can it support students. I think you got to work in partnership, and especially like Dearborn, so we can have literacy coaches and supports for students because of our size. But what about those smaller districts that may not be able to afford it? That's where ISDs can come in and provide those levels of support. But I think we all have to be on the same page in supporting the law, and supporting really the law because we're going to benefit the students. Now that last part, you said, what part did I play prior? So with the read by 3rd grade, I kind of told you that earlier on, is that I advocated for, changes in the retention provision. And then my year as president, so I believe the dyslexia law came in around the same year I was president of MASA. So the structure of MASA is, we have 7 executive board members. We have approximately 30 council members. And we have a legislative policy committee. That committee would then recommend to the council, the 30 council, and then MASA will take their official position on issues. So during that time, we supported that legislation. I believe, if I recall, we also asked for some flexibility with the type of assessment, so you weren't just saying one company or one assessment, that there were flexibility. Like in Dearborn, we used iReady. So we wanted to be careful that districts, already had things in place. As long as it met the letter of the law, it was important. I think with that too, when you look at preschool to 3rd grade, you're doing those screeners, but then you have to follow the students with dyslexia up in the later grades, 4 to 8. And then you would do those periodic assessments for the students who need that. So I heavily support the legislation, and I believe it's needed, and I believe as state superintendent, you need to work with the ISDs and local districts.
And I have some follow-up questions on that, because you brought up the organization, and I know we've had others who have spoken from that position. And the thought is that MASA pushed back on some of this legislation. It took the department 6 years to get that legislation through. And part of that pushback came from that organization. So just want to if you could elaborate a little bit more, because some of the recommendations from MDE that I think most of us at this board would support is strengthening that legislation.
Sure.
So give us your thoughts on how that has evolved from when you were a part of that organization, and how you would work
Sure.
maybe to move that legislation forward.
That's a very fair question. I think, as the president, you're one kind of voting member, so I overall support, but I also understand a lot of what my colleagues were dealing with in the state. And I think one of the things that they're always concerned with, it's a large group, right? And especially districts that are from smaller, do they have the resources is what is needed to support the legislation? So a lot of times, MASA, they're always, looking at, do we have unfunded maintenance? Is the money coming? How can we provide support? So when we were on the organization, we would get recommendations. I think ultimately, though, there were some areas, I think, that were concerns. I could speak to the FOSFA and other areas where, superintendents have had concerns. So as president, you kind of have an obligation to all your members, but I would tell you that when it comes down to it, for me, it's about students. So if it's going to help students, I'm going to be supportive. And sometimes we may have disagreements. We've had it even at our MASA board meetings or council. But then we do follow our protocol and our process when the legislative slate comes and, when we vote to support legislation. But I would say that I believe that all superintendents support, literacy instruction for all students. And we know it's important. We know we need to have the science of reading for all teachers. We understand that phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension teachers need to be trained in. And I think those are important things that MDE is doing in their leadership.
Thank you.
I have a couple of follow-up questions to literacy. You've gone very in-depth in terms of supporting the law. One of the things that changed with the 3rd grade reading law was an emphasis on staffing plans for districts that can't provide the literacy staffing that's necessary to really support the law. So I'm very curious in terms of, in this position, I would think that, you would have an idea of exactly what a staffing plan would look like for a district that would intend to, in fact, present that to MDE before the year even starts, in how they can still support their students or how they will engage their supports around them to ensure that that's not something that happens year after year.
Sure.
And then therefore those students in those districts ail from, really improving literacy.
Yeah. I think we have to provide the support. And again, for the smaller districts, that's where I think the ISDs can come in. That's why I was There's funding uncertainty right now at the state level. I mean, we don't know what the budgets, it is very difficult for us as superintendents and boards to have, to move on things and provide support. When I was in Washington last week advocating, or not last week, excuse me, last month in July, and I was there with AASA because I'm on that governing board, and we were advocating for the students for the release of the Title II, $3, and $4. I was with superintendents from across the state of Michigan. We had 5 that represent Michigan, but we had delegations from all over the country that were there. We spent 9 hours on Capitol Hill meeting with Democrats and Republicans. And we had superintendents from some of the smaller districts, and some of the things that they were saying, to your point, Ms. Schneider, is that I'm larger. The cuts would not be good for us, but I could possibly absorb some of that because of my size. Some of those districts, they have challenges. It would have devastated them not to get some of that funding to support the different students. So I understand that, and that's where I would say we would advocate. I'm in Washington frequently. Part of the reason, 6 national blue ribbon schools. There's only one other district over this time frame that has that. Every time I'm in Washington, guess where I go? If I'm there for another purpose, I'm on Capitol Hill and I'm meeting with legislatures and I'm advocating for students. I've done it every time. The same thing would have to be in Lansing and advocating for funding so you can provide support. And then what do? You work together as a team and you collaborate with the ISDs to support those districts. That's how I would work together.
Okay. Piggyback onto that question, since yes, literacy and funding go hand in hand. The residents of Michigan definitely believe they pay taxes to a public education system that would fund children learning how to read. But school funding in Michigan is one of the most difficult models in the nation. Michigan residents have communicated frustration with understanding where money comes from, where it goes. So $87 million were allocated for the literacy changes our state needs in the last budget. 550 school districts applied for those dollars. MDE approved local district budgets and selected successful applicants for the entirety of those $87 million. You've probably seen the list that's been released. Do you support the required reporting of approved budgets for categoricals and grants to local citizens so they can see line item spending and understand how those literacy dollars are actually getting to their students in classrooms and how it will improve literacy rates in Michigan?
So we're on that list, Dearborn Schools. And we appreciate the funding and getting it. My answer to that is yes. I believe in transparency. One of the things that we've achieved in Dearborn Schools is 7 meritorious budget awards from the National Association. So we have the academic side, but we have the budget side. And that's all about transparency. And that application is intense. Mr. Tom Wall from my department, who leads it, and we do a great job, I believe, in keeping our community informed. It's very complicated, to your say, and it's the understanding of parent, even when you're going for a millage and other things, it's very, very complicated. Some of the things we did, and again, we use social media, is we would do little videos and things to simplify to try to make it easier for understanding. I'm all for transparency. That's what we need. We need to be transparent, with our parents, with our community. Because if we're not, when we want to go, for example, Dearborn, we're looking at the potential next year of a $1.5 billion bond over a 30-year period. But we need to be transparent with them and share what we're doing with the funding we do have and to why do we have that need for our infrastructure.
Thank you.
This next question is about authenticity, humility, and trustworthiness. Leadership often involves acknowledging mistakes. Share an instance where you changed your mind based on new information or feedback. How did you communicate that change, and what did you learn?
Okay. All right. Here's the thing. COVID hit, and we all dealt with the COVID. And actually, Dearborn, we had one of the first 2 cases in the state positive. It was a teacher related to her father. And I can tell you, it was a whirlwind coming at me because we were one of the first 2 cases. And at that time, we didn't know about masks and all these other things that were going on. And I was actually on the phone with the governor's office with MD, Dr. Rice. I talked to Dr. Rice because we were one of the first 2 cases in the state. We obviously know the story there, and we never want to go back. We got shut down, but I had to shut down that school before the state got shut down, okay? We had the media all over the place with the press. We went out and, we met with our parents who were very concerned. We went to the school, and then we had a press conference, and we did the press conference just because there were so many press media that were looking to get to Dearborn and find out what was going on. Everybody was obviously concerned. I gotta tell you, like, as a superintendent, those are some of the toughest times working and making those decisions. Because one of the things that I'm gonna say is we were making decisions. So I'm a collaborative, and I believe in collaboration and working. But sometimes when you're in an emergency, you gotta be definitive and make those decisions. There were decisions that we were making, we knew that didn't please everyone. We tried to work hard at maintaining in-person instruction for our students because I believe that was very important. But there were times that we were virtual, as the whole state was. There were times that we were what we called hybrid, and there were changes in those decisions that we had to make. So we were making constant adaptations. I would get emails, and then I'd get people coming to I remember one of the board meetings when we were talking about our plans. It was 6.5 to 7 hours. I mean, this is what was going on during those times. And I would get emails from, I get like multiple emails. This isn't safe. You need to shut down the district. And then the other side would say, no, we cannot do that. Some would say, why are you running athletics? And others would say, no. What we did is we looked at the data. We were working hard. I had pressure sometimes to close. This is where I want to commend Congresswoman Dingell. She helped me in, I think it was 21, and it was the time when you were required to have testing. We didn't have enough test kits. We may have had to shut down because of the rules at that time. She found the test kits, we kept it open. We were constantly changing our decision. There was no great right answer during COVID. There was what is the best of the worst situations you're dealing with. So we were constantly, this was a challenge for my leadership and my team, but I had my team that came together. This is where the county really came in. Oh my gosh, the support, my associations, we were meeting regularly and collaborating, and we did have to adapt as we went because it was the safety of the students and the instruction of the students.
I understand the adaptability part of it. What was the mistake and what was the lesson?
Well, I guess is just that, when you were looking to, I guess the mistake is we were looking at like the hybrid model, I guess. And we presented it before the board. And then I can tell that providing that, it wasn't gonna fit properly. There was disagreements. And I think that we had to modify that plan that we presented. And it really just had to do with the amount of time that students were gonna be in person versus, and I think we just learned that, you can own it and say, actually, that presentation didn't go well. So we owned it. In fact, I had some board members that, weren't, they're kind of suspect, they're asking questions as to, well, is this really what we're doing? So we went back, we looked at it, we came back to the board, and, we took the feedback, and I think we created a better plan after getting some of that feedback. But again, it was still a difficult situation as we were dealing with the COVID. So I just learned that, if you do make a mistake, you own it, and we're all human, right? We got to work together. You own that mistake. You're very transparent, and I've done that throughout. If there's a mistake, the board will know. Even if it's not me, my team, I'll take responsibility because it is ultimately my responsibility.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next question is, how have you integrated the arts, mental health supports, or social emotional learning into the educational experience? And how do you define success beyond test scores?
So social emotional learning is very important to us. We have my executive director of special populations, Mike Asali, and his team. They do an outstanding job. In fact, we just had a presentation on our multi-tiered system of support, and we're looking at those social areas, maybe restorative practices, and also looking at, attendance issues. And I know we have attendance issues in the state and all districts. We use a group called Care Solace, and they provide support so that families can get the support they need in the social emotional. We have trauma-informed instructional training for all of our students. We also, I would just say, like, I have multiplied the number of social workers in our district. We probably have one of the lowest. I have over 62, I believe it's 62 social workers. So I think those areas are important. You mentioned the arts, I think, at the beginning of that. I'm an advocate, so I'm a big athletic person, hockey, all the sports. I'm a diehard Wings fan. In fact, my students, going back to '97 when I was a teacher, they still say they're Wings fans because of me and, that connection we made. And that was the connection I had through sports. But there were other students that I've seen the power of the connection through arts. And I go to a lot of their performances, and I'm there to support them. I take that sign, they all want to get in the pictures, and we support what they're doing. We have an art festival. The arts are very important in Dearborn, and I go to I speak at the celebration, and we actually choose a superintendent award that actually hangs in my office every year. It's like a competition with all the other art awards. And the other thing I could tell you, and I have this in my resume, but I chaired as superintendent a committee to promote the music. Mr. Dan Taylor, our music teacher, lead teacher in Dearborn, has worked with me in collaboration. What that was about was a few years ago, we were dealing with staffing issues, but we also had students that weren't as excited about going into the music programs, and we were losing our middle school students, so it wasn't feeding into the high school. So I formed a committee, and I brought some of our team together, along with the music professionals and from the Dearborn Symphony together, and we've made great progress at the middle school. We're not where we want to be, but we understand that we need to invest in that. One of the things I've done, because the part of the problem with that was sometimes we weren't getting enough to run classes, then you have to look at your budget. But what I did, and I think they appreciated it, and I made a commitment, and my board supported me, and they wanted me to see me do this, is to provide extra staffing so that those programs stayed vibrant within the district. Because if you don't have the feeder to the high school, then what's going to happen? And so we've done that, and now we've built up momentum. One of the middle schools that honestly, in the music program, that didn't even have a program. Now I was at a concert performance with the parents, and they were just loving what was going on. I mean, seeing their students, and we had traditional music, and it was just amazing to see. And then I would go back as, look, this is what you can do. Here's what I'll tell you. We do Superintendent Honors Night every year in May. And what is that? The Superintendent Honors Night is about students who are recognized for high achievement, but they're honoring a teacher that made a difference in their lives. I was just yesterday with all the new teachers that were hired in Dearborn, and I said to them, I sat in your shoes in '97, and I said to them, you know your content, you know your areas. Your students are not going to necessarily remember you because of the content. It's going to be the relationships you've had with them and those that you've built to support them. Those are the differences you're going to make. So you can't measure that with a number, but I can measure that if you watch the video of that Superintendent Honors Night and you had students. We had students that remembered the kindergarten teacher that had an impact when they were in 12th grade. I just love it when they came and recognized the elementary teachers, because we have a lot of the high school, they're all important. But remembering the impact you had, I mean, those are, right now when I go across the district, my students are the parents and their kids are in the district. And it's so rewarding for me to know that they're successful. And look, they're doing well. I was their teacher. I had an impact. My grandfather and my wife, my two kids have been part of education, and family is very important. Both of my kids are in college. My daughter's following in my wife's footsteps, CPA. She's graduating in a semester. Oh, and I got to say, it's my wife's birthday today. She's watching. Happy birthday. Sorry, I got to throw that in. I couldn't let that one go. But here's the thing. Family is important to me. My grandparents, who they've since passed, but they used to come, and they from Detroit. They would come, and they loved interacting with the students at Salina. They were close because we were bordered Southwest Detroit. My grandfather was a proud Navy veteran, served in the Pacific during World War II, and I heard many stories. Oh my gosh, they just loved it. And my students at my school loved interacting. Family is very important to me. And those are the things that you can't measure. You feel it. You know the impact you've had with kids. Those students, by saying they're still Red Wing fans going back to 97 and they weren't, necessarily in hockey, that was that relationship. And I think that's the power. That is very rewarding as educators.
Can I ask how we're doing on time really quick?
If we can hold off on,
Okay.
on follow-up questions.
I do follow-ups. I just want to make sure we'll make it through.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
getting close.
Okay.
Yep, thanks. Yes.
How much time do we have?
We have,
24 minutes.
24 minutes, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thanks for doing that.
If selected for this opportunity, you'll have the dual role of being the state superintendent and the board chair. How will you ensure that all members' voices will be heard and, when possible, included in key decisions? It's multiple touch points. So could, if possible, share a few examples of when you had to successfully manage conflicts between board members and/or board member and yourself?
So one of the things I'll say is critical if I get this position, having a positive relationship with all of you is essential. I would need to meet with you individually and collectively and find out what your preferences are and work together. I think that it's so important. I've been through the MASB training, and they talk about, in your case, you have 8 board members and then the superintendent. But in their case, in our district, it's like an 8-team. And then our board oversees the college, so it's 9. It's the college president. And it's very important that we work cohesively together. There may be times that there's disagreements, and I think that's okay. I've learned to work where there's disagreements, but it's respectful. The board and myself, the relation, and I have either letters of support from all the board members in my packet, or they support me with this. And part of that, in fact, I had my evaluation meeting last night. I was just glad that the meeting didn't go too late because I didn't want to drive up to Lansing too late, but that's why I requested today as the meeting. But it went well. It went well. And part of that, the strengths they gave me in some of those areas, they understand my ability to build relationships and work together. You provide the direction, but we need to work together as a team. All the board members need to be respectful. One of the things I do, I provide training to superintendents on some of these areas. I learned it when I went through my superintendent training. One of the things I do is in communication is the board members get all the information. If a board member asks a specific question related to an area, I may respond to that board member immediately, but eventually the whole board would get the report or whatever it may be so that you have all that information. And again, I would, that's being transparent, bringing relationships and working together. I think one-on-one, collectively as a team, we need to work together because we need to show that, we are, these things that we stand for in the plan and the goals is very important. Now, you mentioned about a situation. There may be some, right now I told you about a bond that we potentially are looking at, and there may be some different viewpoints of board members, like should we, build new versus renovations and things like that. So I listened to the board and I brought in consulting groups to kind of give us more information. And then what I would tell you in that area, and we haven't come to the final decision, but we got a lot of data. So the data is going to help us drive those decisions. In some cases, I'll just say Fortson High School, one of the beautiful, probably the most beautiful building, if you've ever been to Fortson, one of in the state. Looks like a castle. That building will never be torn down. That building's always going to be there. It's going to be renovated. There may be other buildings, when you look at the data, there's infrastructure issues. And so you may want to keep it, but you may not, because it may not be fiscally responsible. So you have to make those choices. So the way I do it is bring data together for the team. One time I had it where, there were some different ideas on hiring practices. What did? I had some board members that weren't all aligning, and they do great work, and we work so collaboratively together. But it's okay, it was respectful. We brought a committee together, we looked at it, we got their input, and we moved forward. So I think my relationship with you, if I'm fortunate enough, is essential, and I look forward to building those individual and collective relationships.
Having reviewed our strategic plan, please share what you believe are the top 3 priorities and tell us how you will energize both internal and external stakeholders to achieve them. Are there other priorities that you that you believe we should consider if we decide to either renew or revise that plan?
So I think you have a solid plan. That's a tough one to just pull out three, because I think everything is important. And I've looked at other states, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maryland, and some of their effective protocols, and I see some of that that is in the plan. Of the areas that I think, if I had to narrow it down to three, I've already talked about the teacher pipeline, and I think that's essential. We need to have strong teachers in education workforce. But I'm gonna go with early childhood. I think that's essential. We know the data on early childhood in the other states that are effective, the high achieving states. They have vast early childhood programs, and they invest in those areas. I think we're moving in the right direction. One of the things in Dearborn is I started a Young Fives program to provide additional support in classrooms for students. And I also would say that we've looked at our data in Dearborn. We've done studies that we looked at students that were in GSRP, and we do this frequently, and we looked at their achievement level on MSTEP versus the students that would have been eligible for GSRP but did not enroll. And the students in the GSRP readiness program outperformed the other students, and that's been consistent. We do that study. So I think early childhood is critical. The other thing we need to deal with if we're working on early childhood, and this is a concern that comes up through MASA and superintendents, it's space then too, right? I've had that issue in my district. Okay, you want to expand, but you need physical space for the classrooms. There's a couple of different options. We have an early childhood center, but you can also build the early childhood classrooms into each building. And that's what we're looking at potentially with the bond, because we know we're getting ready. We believe in important. Anytime Wayne County, I'll just tell you, sometimes Wayne County would have these extra slots available because some districts weren't using them. My team, we jumped at it. We understand it's important. We want to support our students. The other thing I just would say is literacy instruction. That is just at the essential of what we need to do. We talked about the reading laws. We need to have highly trained workforce. In Dearborn, after the Read by Third Grade, we started this many years ago, and we implemented a Dearborn Teacher Reading Academy for all elementary teachers. And we've provided rigorous training in those areas. We have explicit instruction, that we're implementing, providing multi-tiered support levels. At the middle school level, and when we look at MTSS, we look at Tier 1, everyone, and then more support for students in the Tier 2, and then Tier 3, the most intensive. We started this acceleration class for middle school students in literacy and numeracy, and we have highly trained coaches. In fact, I have literacy coaches that are providing support to our teachers. So I know Dr. Rice and you, the board, have been promoting, or I've heard about the letters training. So we were doing a lot of the things within that in those components. They're in our training. We've been doing it since 2013. But any of those trainings, I think, are going to be very important to provide teachers with the knowledge and the science of reading. The last one I'm going to say, and I kind of touched on it earlier, and I'm just going to say, I think, opportunities for students, college, increasing those post-secondary education and opportunities. I think that's important. I think we can do that. I think I've done it in Dearborn, and I think I know how we can do it. I think we can work together and increase that for our students. I think those are three, but honestly, I think all of them are very important. So it's hard really to choose just three, to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you.
The next question is about self-reflection. How would you ultimately establish your credibility to be the leader in our state in public education?
So the credibility, that doesn't come overnight. That credibility, I'm approaching 30 years this October. That credibility comes, I think, from, what you've done in your career and working together. As I mentioned, I'm all about collaboration and working together with board members. You've got superintendent, you got the entire MASA executive board. You got superintendents in the Upper Peninsula that want to see me as the next state superintendent. So I've been kind of living this credibility of working together. They see me in that role. I'm going to tell you, it was really interesting, and this was before I was decided to apply. And I had reached out to Dr. McGee, and I wasn't sure. I had some questions first, and I needed some questions answers. And he said to me, and I didn't know this, but he had a student that wrote a letter, a recommendation, I believe was on the State Superintendent's Advisory Council. This was before even anybody would have known I was going to apply, and it was recommending me. I think people in the state, they've seen the work I've done with the associations, with Dearborn schools. So that credibility comes. Now, when getting the position, your actions have to match what you're saying you're going to do. And I think because I've been out in Washington and advocating in Lansing, the legislatures already know who I am. They have relationships. That credibility is there. I will get often Senator Centena will call me right from the House or the Senate floor. Glenn, what do you think on this? We're looking at a vote. These kind of things. So they want my expertise. I'd have the same thing with the representatives over my career. So I think the other thing I would just say is this. I've looked at the other high-achieving states, and the state superintendents were visible throughout the state. They did listening tours. You got to get out there and listen and find out what's going on. As superintendent, they'll call in and people are like, well, where is he? I'm not in the office. I'm out. And I know I need to be in the office at times, but I'm in the schools working. And so I think we need to get out there and partner with districts and have an understanding of what they're dealing with. That's where I think that credibility comes in, by building those relationships.
Final question. I think there's an important follow-up to this as well. I think we got 12 minutes. Please share with us your experience in dealing with the IDEA federal legislation as it relates to requirements that are mandated not only for the state, but also for ISDs, RESAs, and local districts. Please share with us how you work with parents, students, administrators, and staff as challenges arise with interpretation and implementation of federal and state requirements. And then additionally, please share any examples you have regarding controversial interpretations regarding students with disabilities that you have been able to assist in solving.
Okay, so IDEA, we know, is very important. AASA, the National Association, we advocate for full funding of IDEA. We believe it's very important. I believe supporting special education students is important. Our board in Dearborn passed a resolution for, full funding for IDEA. I think, working with parents, I believe, in listening to parents of students that are special education and being true listeners and hearing them out. I can tell you that, I had a parent that wanted me to go to what they call an ABA clinic, behavior clinic, and to look at their child that was in this program. And I brought someone from the team and I listened. It was Bright Therapy, and we went and we looked and we said, well, how can we, partner? Have Mr. Asali listen and go. I went there myself as superintendent and I listened to that parent. And that parent had excellent perspective, and she really, she wanted to support her child. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to listen to parents. I think that, when those things come up, I understand that there's a process sometimes when there's disagreements and things. But we got to be empathetic to the parents and what they're dealing with. I would tell you this. So special education support, I'm not certified in special education, but throughout my career, I've really, it's been very important to me. When I was a principal, one of the first people that I met with when I first became a principal in 2003, and I became principal the day after my daughter was born, I'm just gonna say, and my first meeting was with the special ed director, and I knew it was important, because as a classroom teacher, I had seen how sometimes we were doing inclusion, and then we were doing, but we weren't doing it properly. We would have kids pulled out, and then kids would come in, and I was like, there's something going on here, and I called the director at the time, Dr. Gaby, and I was like, what can we do? We started implementing what we call the co-teaching special education model. And I know this board has seen it. So I started this because we came in April, and Mr. Asali presented, and we had a student that came and presented before you. And then I know shortly thereafter, Dr. Pugh came and visited some of the classrooms in Dearborn and looked at that model. I just presented on that model at the state special education administrator conference last week out in Traverse City, Mr. Asaley, and we actually co-presented with the Michigan Department of Education. They came to us with the least restrictive environment, and they asked us as a model. So they presented in the first part of the session, it was MDE, and then it was us because we had the practical example of what we were doing. I believe it's very important to work with parents. Those laws are very important. I also believe they're underfunded. I think that we need to advocate for more fully funding IDA in those other areas. I would also tell you that the one thing about me, whether it's in special education, and at the time when I was a principal, I was actually involved in an organization that had me go to different states to present on that model. So I was doing that as a principal as well. It was very important. And one of the things I said last week at the presentation was initially I had some teachers that weren't necessarily on board with it, but then eventually they came along, and they came along after we provided appropriate training and the fact that it was having a positive impact on their students. I would just say that those students, I'm proud of the teachers in our district that work hard. We know autism and other areas are on the rise, and working with special education students in IDA. And I know that was on a specific topic, but I also just want to mention that you'll see that I believe in capacity building. So it's working and presenting with teams on an area. That's why we were at that special ed conference, because when we build our own capacity, we develop the expertise and we do it together, we're going to support our students through that. That's why you're going to see in my packet is I present nationally on a number of topics and at the state level, the National School Board Association to the state, to the MASB on different topics. That one has a good place in my heart because I just, working with special ed students and providing support to them, I just think is so important.
Thank you so much. We have a follow-up question, and I'll give some historical context. I'm going to read from the actual executive order itself, so that there isn't any confusion about what is actually happening currently, and hopefully get some direction in terms of what you would do moving forward. So the executive order itself is from 1996. It was the 12th executive order. It used a type 2 transfer of powers and authority. And under 380.1701 starts a very long list of how authority and rulemaking was transferred away from the State Board of Education and to the state superintendent. It says, regarding the creation and submission of a state special education plan and administrative rules, therefore. And then it gives a very long list of specific transfers of rulemaking authority from this board to the state superintendent. You fast forward, over 2 decades later almost, and what we have is we are the only state in the nation in 27 years to be investigated by the Office of Civil Rights at the federal level for our issues with providing special education services in the state of Michigan. 2 candidates yesterday had really great responses about checks and balances, the importance of these rules. Having checks and balances is a very real thing. So knowing that this rulemaking authority was transferred from the State Board of Education, knowing where we're currently at today, being the only state in the nation being investigated for our lack of providing solid special education services, would you consider helping those rulemaking authority being returned to the State Board of Education? So that there is a greater conversation and a check and balance.
Okay, so right now it's here's the thing, I would think as we take our direction from the state board. So as state superintendent, I'm taking my direction from you as a board. So I don't see any conflict if it was transferred, because ultimately the goals that you set will be the goals as a board that I would implement, and that is very important. So if that was what the board wanted us to do, we would work together, and I would implement what I'm directed to do. Again, I understand, with special ed students that we gotta, we've got to really be there and work and partner together. So if there's some changes in the rules that make it more effective for us as a collective team to do, I'm all for that, because I'm all about, we're going to do much better, whatever that may be. I'm not well apprised on all the details of that transfer that you just talked about. So I'd have to really research the history to really have a good understanding. One of the things I always say at a board meeting is, sometimes I'll give you the best answer I have, but I'm not going to dig as deep. I'll have to look into it and get back to you. But in this case, overall, we got to provide support for special ed. So if I'm directed by the board to provide that support, yeah. But let's partner. Let's partner with it.
And Ms. Snyder, that was your follow-up question. And I just clarified, because you said we have another question. It was a follow-up question from a
That was it,
board
yes.
member. Okay.
Thank you.
And I believe that concludes all of the questions. And we thank you for coming before us. We thank you for all that you do
Oh, thank you.
for Michigan children within Michigan, and for applying for this very, very important position. And you will hear from HYA later today as to what and if there are next steps for you for this process. So again, I thank you. And we do have just a few minutes, so if there's any questions that you have at this time.
No, I don't have any questions. I think if I were fortunate enough to become the next superintendent, I'd be interested in hearing from you as to your communication preferences, the things that are important to you. That would be my question, if I get the job. And I'll just say, look, good luck with the final decision that you have to make. I support you and the next superintendent. I'm hoping to be the next state superintendent, but I will support the person that is leading the state, working together in collaboration. And just want to thank you for the work you do. It's, there are a lot of challenges, but we can do it together as a team. I know we can. And I can tell you that, I've have a proven track record and a history of working collaboratively. My board can attest to that, the people in my community. And, hopefully, you learned a little more about me today. And I look forward to the potential of a second interview. And good luck with your decision. And the only other thing I would say is I do have some packets that if I could pass around. And it does have, they're linked in my application. There's a QR code that you could actually link, and it's like a digital portfolio. And there was a few letters in there that came at the back that didn't come with my application, with unions and other officials. So if we could. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
And you'll hear from HYA.
Okay.
All right.
Is it okay if I just come around? Is that
You
okay?
can do that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
And we're on break until 11:30 a.m. We'll return at 11:30 a.m.